Rattlesnake Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The first time Ryder Xavier saw Daisy Keller standing in the doorway of his saloon, rainwater streaming from the brim of her sodden hat, he knew she was trouble of the best kind. The kind that made a man want to straighten his spine and smooth down his whiskers. The kind that made him set aside the first slice of pie before he even knew why. Ryder's weathered hands stilled on the glass he'd been polishing. Around him, the Rattlesnake Saloon continued its evening symphony of clinking glasses, boisterous laughter, and the tinny notes from the upright piano in the corner where old Pete hammered out tunes with more enthusiasm than skill. But for Ryder, the cacophony faded to nothing as he watched the slender woman scan the room with eyes the color of summer prairie grass. "You looking for someone, madam?" he called out, setting the glass down with deliberate care. She stepped fully inside, closing the door against the April downpour. "I'm looking for work, actually," she said, her voice carrying a hint of something Eastern in its cadence. "I heard you might need a cook." Ryder raised an eyebrow. His previous cook, a surly man named Jeremiah, had left 2 weeks prior after a dispute involving a poker game and accusations of cheating. Since then, Ryder had been serving basic fare that satisfied his customers' hunger, but little else. "News travels fast," he remarked. "Who told you?" "The stagecoach driver. Said the food here has gone from decent to dire." A smile flickered across her face, revealing a dimple in her right cheek. His words, not mine. Ryder couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped him. Tom never was one to mince words. He gestured to the bar stool across from him. "What's your name?" "Daisy Keller." "Ryder Xavier. I own this establishment." He studied her as she perched on the stool. She wasn't what he'd expected when he'd put out word he needed a cook. Women were scarce in Rattlesnake Creek, and those who worked in saloons typically didn't do so in the kitchen. "Where are you from, Miss Keller?" "Boston, most recently. Before that, Philadelphia." "Long way from home." She met his gaze directly. "Home is wherever I make it now." There was a story there, Ryder was certain, but he wasn't one to pry. Everyone in the West had a past they'd rather leave behind. It was one of the unspoken rules of frontier life: judge a person by what they did here and now, not by what ghosts might be chasing them. "Can you cook?" he asked instead. "Better than most, especially pies." Ryder glanced over at the meager offerings on his counter, a plate of dry biscuits and some beans. He'd never been much in the kitchen himself. "Wouldn't take much to improve on what we've got now. But a saloon kitchen is different from a fancy Eastern home. I worked in a restaurant in Boston for 3 years, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week." Her chin lifted slightly. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Xavier." Something in her steady gaze convinced him, or perhaps it was simply that he was tired of his own cooking. "All right, Miss Keller, you can start tomorrow. There's a room upstairs you can use, last door on the left. It's not much, but it's clean." Relief washed over her face before she composed herself again. "Thank you. You won't regret it." Ryder nodded, already wondering if he would. A young, unaccompanied woman working in his saloon would draw attention, not all of it welcome. But there was a certain determination in Daisy Keller's eyes that suggested she could handle herself. "Fair warning," he added. "The men who come through these doors aren't always gentlemen." Daisy removed her wet hat, revealing hair the color of wheat honey. "Mr. Xavier, I didn't travel 2,000 miles west expecting to find gentlemen. I'll manage just fine." And somehow, Ryder believed her. By the end of her first week, Daisy Keller had transformed the Rattlesnake Saloon's reputation. Word spread quickly through the small town that Xavier's place now served food worth riding in for. The regular clientele doubled, then tripled, with many coming specifically for the midday and evening meals. Ryder leaned against the doorframe between the main saloon and the small kitchen, watching as Daisy expertly managed 3 cast-iron pans on the wood-burning stove. Her hair was tied back with a simple ribbon, and a light sheen of perspiration glistened on her forehead from the heat. "Never seen men so eager to eat vegetables," he commented, noting the generous portions of carrots and peas she was adding to a savory stew. Daisy flashed him a quick smile. "Everyone needs vegetables, whether they admit it or not. Most just don't know how to cook them properly. She sprinkled in a pinch of something from a small cloth pouch. "What's that?" "Thyme. I brought some dried herbs with me. Next spring I'll plant a small garden out back, if that's agreeable to you." Ryder found himself nodding before he'd even considered it. "Sure, whatever you need." She seemed to take his easy acquiescence in stride, as if she'd never doubted he would agree. There was something both unsettling and refreshing about her quiet confidence. "Sheriff Wade says your chicken and dumplings reminded him of his mother's cooking," Ryder said. "I think you've made a friend for life there." "The sheriff seems like a good man." "He is. Keeps order without too much fuss." Ryder hesitated, then added, "Noticed he's taken to having lunch here every day this week?" Daisy's hands stilled momentarily, then resumed their work. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all. Just making an observation." She glanced up at him, a knowing look in her eyes. "He's married, Mr. Xavier, with 3 children. He comes for the food, nothing more." Ryder felt his ears warm, embarrassed to have been so transparent. "Right, of course." He cleared his throat. "What's for dessert tonight?" "Apple pie. I found a farmer outside town willing to sell me the last of his stored winter apples." She moved to a wooden board where a perfect circle of pie dough awaited filling. "They're not as crisp as autumn apples, but with the right amount of cinnamon and nutmeg, they'll do just fine." Ryder watched her hands as she worked the dough, noting the efficiency of her movements. No wasted motion, no hesitation, the same way she seemed to approach everything. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked. A shadow passed over her face. "My grandmother, initially. She believed every girl should know her way around a kitchen. She began arranging apple slices in a perfect spiral. Later, I had a mentor at Remington's restaurant in Boston, Mrs. Gibbons. She taught me about balancing flavors, presentation. Must have been a good place." "It was." Her tone indicated the subject was closed. Ryder knew when to back away from a topic. "I'll let you finish up here. Looking forward to that pie." That evening, as the saloon filled with its usual crowd plus a healthy number of townspeople who'd come for supper, Ryder found himself watching Daisy more than was strictly necessary. She moved through the room with quiet efficiency, delivering plates and exchanging pleasantries with customers who were already greeting her by name. When she brought out the first apple pie, the aroma preceded her, causing several conversations to halt mid-sentence. She set it on the counter beside the bar, and Ryder felt a strange sense of pride, as if her accomplishment somehow reflected on him. "First slice is yours, Mr. Xavier," she said, cutting into the golden crust. Steam rose from the perfect wedge as she transferred it to a plate. He accepted it with a nod of thanks, aware of the envious glances from nearby patrons. The first bite was a revelation, sweet but not cloying, with a hint of tartness from the apples and the warm complexity of spices. The crust practically melted on his tongue. "Well?" Daisy asked, a rare hint of uncertainty in her voice. Ryder looked up, finding her watching him expectantly. "It's the best pie I've ever had," he said honestly, "and I'm not just saying that because you work for me." Her smile, then genuine and unguarded, did something peculiar to his chest, a tightening sensation he chose to ignore. "Good," she said. "I'll be making different ones as fruits come into season." As she turned away to serve the other customers, Ryder took another bite and made a silent, impulsive decision. If this was to be a regular offering, then he would make sure to save the first slice for himself every time. A small indulgence for a man who allowed himself few. He couldn't have known then how significant that small decision would become. Summer arrived in Wyoming with sudden intensity, the spring rains giving way to clear skies and relentless sun. The Rattlesnake Saloon thrived, drawing not only the usual cowboys and townspeople, but also travelers passing through who had heard about the excellent food. Daisy had settled into life in Rattlesnake Creek with remarkable ease. She maintained a polite distance from most people, but was universally respected for her cooking and no-nonsense manner. She'd rebuffed several suitors with such gentle firmness that they somehow left feeling they'd had a lucky escape rather than a rejection. Ryder found himself enjoying their easy working relationship. She ran the kitchen with complete autonomy, while he managed the bar and the business side of things. They spoke mainly about practical matters, supplies needed, repairs to the stove, menu plans, but occasionally shared quiet moments at the end of the night when the last customers had gone and they sat together at the bar, tallying the day's earnings. It was during one of these moments, in late June, that Daisy first mentioned her past in more than vague terms. "My husband died 3 years ago," she said abruptly, looking down at her cup of tea. "Influenza. It swept through Boston that winter, took him in less than a week." Ryder, who had been reviewing the week's receipts, set down his pencil. "I'm sorry to hear that." She nodded, still not looking up. "After he died, I stayed on at the restaurant, worked longer hours, tried to keep busy." Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. "But everything there reminded me of him. We'd met there, you see. He was a regular customer before we courted." "So you came west to start fresh?" "Yes, though I never planned to end up quite this far west." A small smile touched her lips. "The stagecoach I was on was robbed outside of Denver. They took everything I had except for my herbs and a few personal items I kept in a pouch under my dress." Ryder frowned. "You never mentioned that. What was there to say?" "It happened. I survived." She shrugged. "I worked my way from town to town, taking whatever jobs I could find until I had enough saved to continue on. I was headed to California, actually, but when I heard you needed a cook..." She trailed off. "Their loss is Rattlesnake Creek's gain," Ryder said. He hesitated, then asked, "What was his name? Your husband?" Thomas Keller." She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. "He was a good man, kind, always saw the best in people. Sounds like someone worth remembering." "He is." She drew a deep breath. "Anyway, that's my sad story. Not so different from many others, I imagine." Ryder nodded. "We've all left something behind." He didn't elaborate on his own past, and she didn't ask. Another unspoken rule between them, respect for privacy. "On a brighter note," Daisy said, clearly ready to change the subject, "I'm planning a strawberry pie for tomorrow. Found a woman outside town who grows them in her garden. They're small, but sweet." "Looking forward to it," Ryder said, returning to his ledger. But his thoughts lingered on what she'd shared. A widow, making her way alone in a harsh world. It explained the self-sufficiency, the careful way she held herself apart from others. The next evening, true to her word, Daisy presented a strawberry pie that had the saloon buzzing with appreciation. As had become their custom over the weeks, she brought the first slice to Ryder. "Your opinion, Mr. Xavier?" she asked as he savored the first bite. "Exceptional, as always, Miss Keller." The routine gave him a strange comfort. The first slice of pie, a moment of simple pleasure in a life that had held too few of them. And though he wouldn't admit it to himself yet, the real pleasure was in the brief moment of connection with the woman who had created it. July brought scorching heat and the year's first major cattle drives, filling the saloon with dusty, thirsty cowboys eager to spend their pay after weeks on the trail. Ryder hired 2 additional barmaids to help serve the crowd, but even so, they were stretched thin. Daisy worked tirelessly, cooking from dawn until well after midnight, producing seemingly endless quantities of food. On the busiest nights, Ryder would find her still in the kitchen after the last customer had gone, preparing for the next day. "You need to rest," he told her one night, finding her kneading bread dough at 2 in the morning. "This can wait until tomorrow." She shook her head, not pausing in her rhythmic movements. "If I start the dough now, it can rise while I sleep, and I'll bake it before breakfast. Otherwise, we won't have enough. We can buy bread from the bakery in town if needed. Their bread is adequate, but not exceptional." Her hands continued their work, pressing and folding. "And people expect exceptional now." Ryder leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're going to work yourself to exhaustion." Daisy looked up then, a streak of flour on her cheek. "I'm fine, Mr. Xavier. Truly." "Ryder," he said impulsively. "After hours, at least, you might as well call me Ryder." She seemed surprised by the suggestion, her hands stilling momentarily. "All right, Ryder." His name sounded different in her voice, somehow softer. "And I suppose I could call you Daisy, if that's agreeable." A small smile curved her lips. It is. Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change neither acknowledged aloud. But when she brought him the first slice of blackberry pie the next evening, their fingers brushed as she handed him the plate, and neither pulled away quite as quickly as propriety might have dictated. August brought a heat wave that left the whole town listless and irritable. Business at the saloon slowed during the hottest part of the day, but the evenings were still busy as people sought relief from their stifling homes. Daisy adapted her cooking to the weather, offering lighter fare and cold dishes when possible. Her fruit pies, however, remained a constant, though she now baked them in the cool hours of early morning. One particularly stifling afternoon, when the saloon was nearly empty, Ryder found Daisy sitting on the back steps of the kitchen, a rare moment of rest. She was shelling peas into a bowl, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing slender forearms tanned by the sun. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She shifted slightly to make room on the step. "Please do." Ryder sat beside her, aware of the narrow space that forced their shoulders to almost touch. He took a handful of pea pods from the basket and began to help, splitting them open with his thumb and letting the peas fall into the bowl. "My mother used to say this was the perfect job for restless children," he commented. "Keeps the hands busy and provides something useful." "Were you a restless child?" "According to her, I never stopped moving." He smiled at the memory. Always running, climbing, exploring, drove her to distraction. "I can picture that," Daisy said, a teasing note in her voice. "A little boy with wild hair and skinned knees, always in trouble. That was me. My poor mother had her hands full, especially after my father died. I was 8. Daisy's hands paused. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Mining accident." He continued shelling peas, focusing on the repetitive motion. "She did her best, raising me and my sister alone. Taught us to work hard, be honest. She passed on when I was 20. And your sister?" "Married a farmer in Nebraska. Has 4 children now." He glanced at her. "I visit when I can, but it's been a couple of years." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the splitting of pods and the cicadas buzzing in the heat. "How did you end up owning a saloon?" Daisy eventually asked. Ryder chuckled. "Not the path my mother would have chosen for me, that's certain." He tossed an empty pod into the discard pile. "After she died, I drifted for a while. Worked as a ranch hand, tried my luck in the silver mines, even rode with a cattle drive up from Texas. A true man of the West." "I suppose so. Never settled anywhere for long until I came to Rattlesnake Creek 6 years ago. The saloon was run down, barely staying afloat. The owner was an old-timer named Hank who'd lost his passion for the place after his wife died. He was ready to close it down when I offered to buy it." "You saw potential where others didn't." Ryder shrugged. "I saw a town that was growing and a business that just needed some care. Fixed the roof, expanded the dining area, added rooms upstairs for travelers." He paused. "And now, thanks to you, we've got the best food in 3 counties. Daisy smiled, the compliment bringing a touch of color to her cheeks. "It's a good place. You've built something worthwhile here." The sincerity in her voice warmed him. "Thank you. That means a lot." Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly proper. Ryder found himself noticing details he'd overlooked before: the faint freckles across the bridge of her nose, the way one lock of hair curled stubbornly against her temple, despite the neat bun at the nape of her neck. The spell was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Daisy stood quickly, brushing her hands on her apron. "That will be the Hanson brothers. They always stop in when they come to town for supplies." Ryder nodded, rising more slowly. "I'll send them out back if they want food. It's too hot to light the stove in the kitchen. I made cold ham and potato salad this morning. There's plenty." As she turned to go inside, Ryder impulsively caught her hand. "Daisy." She looked back, question in her eyes. "I'm glad you got off that stagecoach here." A smile spread across her face, genuine and unguarded. "So am I." The touch of her hand lingered with him long after she'd gone inside. Autumn arrived with merciful coolness, painting the distant mountains with splashes of gold and crimson. The town settled into a steady rhythm after the summer rush, and the saloon returned to serving mostly locals and the occasional traveler. Daisy's reputation as a cook had spread beyond Rattlesnake Creek. Twice in September, she received offers of employment from establishments in larger towns, once from a hotel in Cheyenne, and once from a high-end restaurant in Denver. Both times, she politely declined. "You could earn more elsewhere," Ryder remarked after she told him about the Denver offer. They were sitting at their usual spots at the bar after closing, sharing a pot of tea. "I'm not interested in moving again," she said simply. "I like it here." Ryder tried to hide his relief. The thought of the saloon without Daisy had become increasingly difficult to imagine. "Well, I'm not complaining. Your apple pies alone keep half the town coming back." "Speaking of which," Daisy said, "the apple harvest is exceptional this year. Mr. Jenkins at the orchard outside town is selling them by the barrel. I was thinking we might buy extra to preserve for winter." "Whatever you think best." Ryder had long since given her complete control over kitchen purchases. Her careful management actually saved them money in the long run, despite her insistence on quality ingredients. "I'll need help bringing them in. They're heavy." "I'll take the wagon out tomorrow." Daisy nodded, then hesitated. "Would you mind if I came along? I haven't been outside town in months." Something about the request pleased him inordinately. "I'd welcome the company." The next day dawned clear and cool, perfect for a drive into the countryside. Ryder brought the wagon around to the front of the saloon just after breakfast, finding Daisy already waiting. She wore a simple blue dress with a matching bonnet, a shawl draped over her shoulders against the morning chill. "You look nice," he said, then immediately felt foolish for the comment. But Daisy smiled, accepting his hand as he helped her up to the wagon seat. "Thank you. It's good to wear something other than a kitchen apron." The ride to Jenkins's orchard took them along winding dirt roads through rolling grasslands, dotted with stands of cottonwood trees. The mountains loomed to the west, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "It's beautiful here," Daisy said, gazing at the landscape. "Different from the east, but beautiful in its own way." "How so?" She considered the question. "Everything here feels bigger, more open. In Boston, you're always surrounded by buildings, by people. Here, you can breathe." Ryder nodded. "That's why I never could settle in a big city. Tried once. Spent 6 months in St. Louis. Felt like the buildings were closing in on me." "I can see that." She glanced at him. "You belong here, with all this space around you." The observation struck him as remarkably perceptive. He did feel a connection to this land, a sense of rightness he'd never found elsewhere. They reached the orchard mid-morning. Old Man Jenkins greeted them warmly, especially Daisy, whom he declared made the finest apple pie this side of the Mississippi. He insisted they sample the different varieties of apples he grew before making their selection. Wandering among the laden trees, Daisy's face lit with genuine delight as she bit into each offering, considering the flavor and texture with the seriousness of a connoisseur. Ryder found himself watching her more than tasting the apples himself, captivated by her enthusiasm. "These," she finally declared, holding up a medium-sized red apple. "They're perfect. Tart but not too sour, firm enough to hold their shape when baked." Jenkins nodded approvingly. "The Rome beauty. Good choice, Mrs. Keller." Neither of them corrected his assumption about her marital status. They loaded 3 barrels into the wagon, along with a smaller crate of mixed varieties that Jenkins insisted on giving them for sampling. The old man waved them off with an invitation to return for more whenever they needed. Instead of heading directly back to town, Ryder took a longer route that followed a creek through a picturesque valley. When they reached a particularly lovely spot where the water widened into a small pool surrounded by golden cottonwoods, he pulled the wagon to a stop. "Thought we might take a break here," he said. "I packed some lunch if you're hungry." Daisy looked pleasantly surprised. "You planned this?" "Hoped for it. Anyway." He reached behind the seat and produced a basket. "Nothing fancy. Cold chicken, bread, some of that pickled relish you made last week." "It sounds perfect." They spread a blanket on the grassy bank of the creek, the October sun warm enough to make the spot comfortable despite the autumn air. As they ate, Conversation flowed easily between them, touching on everything from town gossip to books they'd read to childhood memories. "I've never asked," Daisy said as they finished their meal. "Why Rattlesnake Creek? I haven't seen a single rattlesnake since I arrived." Ryder chuckled. "Legend has it the first settlers were camped by the creek when they were surrounded by a nest of rattlers. They managed to kill them all without anyone being bitten, which they took as a good omen. Decided to name the place after their victory." "Is it true?" "Who knows? Most town names have stories like that, some true, some embellished, some complete fabrications. Makes for good telling, though." Daisy leaned back on her hands, face tilted to the sun. "I like knowing the stories of a place. It makes it feel more like home." Ryder watched her, struck by how relaxed she appeared, a contrast to her usual composed efficiency. A strand of hair had escaped her bonnet, dancing in the slight breeze. "Is that what Rattlesnake Creek is becoming for you?" he asked. "Home?" She opened her eyes, turning to look at him. "Yes," she said simply. "More than I expected it to." Something in her direct gaze made Ryder's heart beat faster. They'd been circling each other for months, maintaining a careful distance despite the growing connection between them. But here, away from the town and the saloon, that distance suddenly seemed unnecessary, even foolish. "Daisy," he began, not entirely sure what he wanted to say, only knowing he needed to say something. Before he could continue, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the blanket. The simple touch silenced him more effectively than any words could have. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." They sat there for a long moment, hands touching, neither moving to close the remaining distance between them, but acknowledging that something had shifted irrevocably. Finally, Ryder gently turned his hand to clasp hers. "We should head back. People will wonder where we've gone." Daisy nodded, though reluctance showed in her eyes. "Yes, of course." The ride back to town was quieter, both lost in their own thoughts. But their hands found each other again on the wagon seat, fingers intertwined as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That evening, when Daisy brought him the first slice of apple pie made from their morning's harvest, their fingers brushed in the exchange deliberately, this time. And when their eyes met, there was no pretense that it was accidental. The fall season brought a new ritual to the Rattlesnake Saloon. Every Sunday, when business was slowest, Ryder and Daisy would close early and have dinner together in the kitchen. These private meals became the highlight of their week, a chance to talk without interruption, to simply enjoy each other's company away from curious eyes. They were careful in public, maintaining a proper employer-employee relationship, but those who paid attention might notice the way Ryder's eyes followed Daisy as she moved through the saloon, or how she always seemed to know where he was in the room without looking. And everyone noticed that the first slice of whatever pie Daisy baked each day was invariably served to Ryder. "You two make a handsome couple," Mrs. Patterson remarked to Daisy one afternoon as she purchased a whole apple pie to take home. The older woman was the closest thing Rattlesnake Creek had to a society matron, her husband having made a fortune in the cattle business. Daisy carefully wrapped the pie in brown paper. "Mr. Xavier is my employer, Mrs. Patterson. Nothing more." The older woman raised a knowing eyebrow. "If you say so, dear. But a woman my age recognizes certain looks between a man and a woman." Daisy felt her cheeks warm, but kept her expression neutral. "Your pie, madam. That will be 75 cents. Later that evening, as she and Ryder sat together at their usual spots at the bar, she mentioned the exchange. "People are talking," she said, stirring her tea. Ryder glanced up from the ledger he was reviewing. "About?" "Us. Mrs. Patterson all but accused us of courting today." He set down his pencil. "Does that bother you?" Daisy considered the question. "I'm not sure. I've been a widow for 3 years. In Boston, that would still be considered a proper mourning period. Here, everything seems to move faster." "Different world, different rules," Ryder agreed. "But what matters is what feels right to you." She looked up at him then, her eyes searching his face. "What about you? Does it bother you that people talk?" "Only if it causes you discomfort." He hesitated, then added more softly, "I'm not ashamed of my feelings for you, Daisy." It was the closest either had come to a direct acknowledgement of what was growing between them. Her breath caught slightly at his words. "Nor I of mine for you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryder reached across the bar, taking her hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Then let them talk. We know the truth of things." Daisy nodded, her fingers curling around his. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by that simple touch, everything and nothing changing between them. As October gave way to November, the first serious snows arrived, blanketing the town in white. Business at the saloon slowed as travel became more difficult, but the locals still made their way in, perhaps even more eager for the warmth and companionship the place offered as winter settled in. Daisy adjusted her cooking to the season-hardy stews, roasts, and warming desserts that filled the saloon with comforting aromas. Her pies continued to be the most popular offering, with variations featuring dried fruits, nuts, and preserves from the summer's bounty. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, Ryder found himself alone in the saloon after closing. The few customers who'd braved the weather had departed early, not wanting to risk being stranded in town. Even Daisy had retired to her room upstairs, the kitchen spotless and ready for morning. Ryder moved through the empty room, turning down lamps and checking that the doors were secure against the storm. As he approached the stairs, a floorboard creaked overhead, followed by the soft sound of footsteps. He paused, one foot on the bottom step, looking up. Daisy appeared at the top of the stairs, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders over her nightdress, her hair loose around her face. "I thought I heard someone still moving about," she said. "Is everything all right?" "Just locking up," Ryder replied, suddenly very aware of the intimacy of the moment, the two of them alone in the silent building, the storm isolating them from the rest of the world. "The storm's getting worse. Might be snowed in by morning." Daisy descended a few steps, then stopped, her hand resting on the railing. "I couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts." "About?" She hesitated, then said simply, "You." The honesty of her answer took his breath away. They had been circling this moment for months. Each step bringing them closer to an inevitable conclusion neither had been quite ready to face. "Would you like to talk?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She nodded, continuing down the stairs until she stood on the step just above him, bringing their eyes level with each other. "Yes." Ryder led her to a table near the dormant fireplace. He quickly rekindled the fire, adding logs until flames danced cheerfully, pushing back the chill of the night. Daisy sat in a chair, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, watching him work. When he joined her at the table, neither spoke immediately. The fire crackled in the hearth, and outside, the wind moaned around the eaves of the building. Finally, Daisy broke the silence. "I need to know what this is between us, Ryder." Direct and to the point, it was so characteristic of her that it made him smile despite the gravity of the conversation. "What do you want it to be?" he asked. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him, her gaze steady. "Something real. Something lasting." "So do I." The admission came easily, as if he'd been waiting all along to say it aloud. "I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you, Daisy." "I loved my husband," she said quietly. "Truly loved him. When he died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to find those feelings again." "And have you? Found them again?" She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Yes, and it frightens me." Ryder reached across the table, taking her hands in his. They were warm, slightly rough from her work in the kitchen, the hands of a woman who created beautiful things through labor and love. "What frightens you?" he asked gently. "Losing it all again. Losing you." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm not sure I could bear it a second time." "Life offers no guarantees," Ryder acknowledged. "Not here, not anywhere. But I can promise you this. I will cherish every day we have together, whether it's 50 years or 50 days. Another tear followed the first, but Daisy was smiling now. "When did you become so wise, Ryder Xavier?" "Must be all that exceptional pie," he said, drawing a laugh from her that warmed him more than the fire. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. She came willingly, her head resting against his chest as his arms encircled her. They stood like that for a long moment, listening to the storm outside and the steady beat of each other's hearts. When Ryder finally tilted her chin up and lowered his mouth to hers, it felt like coming home after a long journey. Her lips were soft beneath his, hesitant at first, then responding with increasing certainty. Her arms slid around his neck, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Daisy Keller," he said, the words that had been building inside him for months finally finding voice. Her smile was radiant in the firelight. "And I love you, Ryder Xavier." Outside, the blizzard continued to rage. But within the walls of the Rattlesnake Saloon, they had found shelter in each other's arms. As winter settled over Rattlesnake Creek, the town adjusted to the rhythm of the season. Days grew shorter, temperatures plummeted, and people ventured out less frequently. But the Rattlesnake Saloon remained a hub of activity and warmth, perhaps even more valued for the respite it offered from the harsh weather. For Ryder and Daisy, the winter brought a new phase in their relationship. While they maintained propriety in public, she still had her room upstairs. He still lived in the small house behind the saloon. There was no longer any pretense about their feelings for each other. They were courting, officially and openly, much to the satisfaction of the townspeople who had been watching their slow-building romance with interest. "About time," Sheriff Wade commented one evening, raising his coffee cup in a toast after Ryder had casually referred to Daisy as "my lady" in conversation. "The whole town's been waiting for you two to figure it out." Ryder had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Were we that obvious?" "Son, a blind man could see the way you look at her. And the way she saves that first slice of pie for you every day?" The sheriff shook his head with a smile. "Dead giveaway." The pie ritual had indeed become something of a legend in Rattlesnake Creek. Regardless of how busy the saloon might be, Daisy always brought the first slice to Ryder personally. It was a small gesture, but one loaded with meaning for both of them, a daily renewal of the connection between them. As Christmas approached, the saloon took on a festive air. Daisy hung pine boughs over the bar and around the door frames, their fresh scent mingling with the aromas from the kitchen. Ryder found an old set of sleigh bells that he hung on the front door, announcing each arrival with a cheerful jingle. A week before Christmas, Ryder closed the saloon early and hitched his horse to the sleigh he'd borrowed from the livery stable. Daisy emerged from the kitchen, wrapped in her warmest coat and a new woolen scarf he'd given her. "Where are we going?" she asked as he helped her into the sleigh, tucking a buffalo robe around her legs. "You'll see." He climbed in beside her and flicked the reins, setting the horse in motion. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead in a velvet sky. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and the runners of the sleigh made a soft shushing sound as they glided over the packed snow. Ryder guided the horse out of town and along the creek, following a path that wound through stands of pine trees. After about 20 minutes, they emerged into a clearing where a small cabin stood, golden light spilling from its windows. "What is this place?" Daisy asked as Ryder brought the sleigh to a halt. "It belongs to the Petersons. They use it as a hunting cabin in the fall, but it sits empty most of the year." He helped her down from the sleigh. "They were kind enough to let me borrow it for the evening." Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the rough-hewn table was set for dinner with the Petersons' best china. A small pine tree stood in one corner, decorated with paper stars and strings of dried berries. Daisy turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "You did all this?" "Had some help," Ryder admitted. "Mrs. Peterson arranged the table and her husband got the fire going earlier, but the idea was mine." "It's wonderful." She removed her coat and scarf, hanging them on a peg by the door. Ryder busied himself uncovering the dishes Mrs. Peterson had prepared: roast duck, potatoes, winter vegetables, and fresh bread, all kept warm in covered dishes near the fire. There was a bottle of wine, too, a luxury rarely seen in Rattlesnake Creek. As they ate by candlelight, sharing the wine and conversation, Ryder found himself studying Daisy's face, memorizing each detail. The firelight cast a warm glow on her skin, highlighting the gold in her hair and the clear green of her eyes. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Just thinking how beautiful you are," he said honestly, "and how lucky I am." A blush colored her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself, Cowboy." After dinner, they moved to sit before the fire on a bearskin rug. Daisy leaned back against Ryder's chest, his arms around her waist, both content in the simple pleasure of being together away from prying eyes. "I have something for you," Ryder said after a while. "An early Christmas gift." "Oh?" She turned slightly to look at him. "Should I be concerned?" He chuckled, reaching into his pocket. "I hope not." The small box he produced was covered in worn velvet. Daisy's eyes widened as she took it from him with slightly trembling hands. "Ryder." "Open it," he urged softly. Inside, nestled on a cushion of faded satin, was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," Ryder explained, his voice rough with emotion. "My father gave it to her when they married. It's not fancy, but—" "It's beautiful," Daisy interrupted, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Ryder took the ring from the box, holding it between his fingers. "Daisy Keller, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment she was silent, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Then she nodded, unable to speak. Ryder slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Ryder Xavier, I will marry you." He gathered her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that conveyed all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. "When?" Daisy asked, admiring the ring on her finger. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next week, next spring." Ryder pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm not a patient man by nature, but for you, I'll wait as long as you need." She considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. "After Christmas," she decided, "the last week of the year. A new beginning as the year turns." "Perfect," Ryder agreed, pulling her close again. "Absolutely perfect." They were married on December 30th, 1878, in the small white church on the edge of town. Despite the winter weather, the building was filled to capacity with well-wishers. Nearly the entire population of Rattlesnake Creek turned out to see their favorite saloon owner wed the woman whose cooking had become legendary throughout the territory. Daisy wore a dress of deep blue velvet, made specially for the occasion by Mrs. Patterson and her daughters. In her hair, she wore a comb set with pearls that had belonged to Ryder's mother, and at her throat, a gold locket containing a small portrait of her first husband, a connection to her past that Ryder had encouraged her to maintain. "He was part of what made you who you are," he had told her when she'd hesitantly asked if he would mind. "I could never resent that." Ryder waited at the altar in a new black suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion, his face cleanly shaven. When Daisy appeared at the back of the church on Sheriff Wade's arm, the lawman having offered to give her away in the absence of any family, Ryder felt his heart stop, then resume at double pace. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, exchanged in clear voices that carried to the back of the church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation nearly lifted the roof. The celebration continued at the saloon, which had been transformed for the occasion with evergreen boughs, ribbons, and candles. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by the townspeople, and someone had arranged for a fiddler from a neighboring town to provide music for dancing. As the new Mrs. Xavier moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, she found herself repeatedly drawn back to her husband's side, as if an invisible thread connected them. "Happy?" Ryder asked during a rare moment alone, his arm around her waist as they watched their friends and neighbors celebrating. "More than I ever imagined possible," Daisy replied, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "Completely," He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I am looking forward to when everyone goes home and I can have you to myself." The warmth in his eyes sent a shiver of anticipation through her. "Patience, Mr. Xavier. Just a little longer." It was well past midnight when the last guests finally departed, leaving the newlyweds alone in the saloon that had brought them together. While Daisy changed out of her wedding dress, Ryder moved through the main room, extinguishing lamps and locking doors. The place was uncharacteristically quiet, the echoes of the day's celebration still hanging in the air. He climbed the stairs to what had been Daisy's room and would now be their shared quarters until spring, when they planned to begin building a proper house on land Ryder owned at the edge of town. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities and promises. Daisy was waiting for him, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a white nightgown that made her look both innocent and enticing. Ryder crossed the room and took her in his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that held all the passion they had restrained in public. "My wife," he murmured against her lips, the words filling him with wonder. "My husband," she replied, her arms twining around his neck as she returned his kiss with equal fervor. That night, as snow fell gently outside the window of their small room above the saloon, Ryder and Daisy Xavier began their life together, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but home. Spring 1879 arrived with its usual capriciousness in Wyoming, warm days followed by sudden snowstorms, the landscape gradually transitioning from white to brown to green. As the weather improved, Ryder began construction on their new home, a comfortable two-story house on a rise overlooking the creek. Daisy continued to run the saloon's kitchen with her customary efficiency, though now she had an assistant, a young widow named Clara, who had moved to town with her young son. The arrangement allowed Daisy more time to help with the house building and to plan for their future. One evening in late April, as they sat together on the partially completed porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and purple, Daisy took Ryder's hand and placed it on her stomach. "I have news," she said, her eyes bright with happiness. It took Ryder a moment to understand her meaning. When he did, his face transformed with joy. "A baby? Are you certain?" Daisy nodded. "Dr. Marshall confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Ryder gathered her into his arms, his laughter echoing across the open land. "When?" "November, he thinks, just before Thanksgiving." "A winter baby." Ryder placed his hand on her still flat stomach again, awe in his expression. "Our child." They sat together as twilight deepened, talking of names and plans, of hopes and dreams for this new life they had created together. The future, already bright with promise, now seemed even more miraculous. As Daisy's pregnancy progressed through the summer and into fall, life in Rattlesnake Creek continued its steady rhythm. The saloon thrived under their joint management, with Ryder handling the business side and Daisy overseeing the kitchen, though she gradually reduced her hours as her condition advanced. Their new home was completed in August, a comfortable dwelling with a spacious kitchen, Ryder's gift to Daisy, a large front porch, and a nursery painted in soft yellow. They moved in with the help of friends from town, establishing their first true home together. The ritual of the first slice of pie continued, though now it took place in their own dining room as often as at the saloon. Each night, no matter what else might be happening, Daisy made sure Ryder received the first slice of whatever pie she had baked that day. It had become more than a tradition, it was a symbol of their connection, a daily renewal of the love between them. On a crisp November evening, with the first snow of the season dusting the ground outside, Daisy went into labor. Dr. Marshall was summoned, along with Mrs. Patterson, who had assisted at many births in the town. Ryder paced anxiously outside the bedroom door as his wife's labor progressed, each cry from within cutting him to the quick. Sheriff Wade and several other friends kept him company, offering support and the occasional shot of whiskey to steady his nerves. "She's strong, Ryder," the sheriff assured him. "One of the strongest women I've ever known. She'll come through this fine." After what seemed an eternity, a new cry pierced the night, the unmistakable wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Ryder froze mid-stride, his heart hammering in his chest. The bedroom door opened and Mrs. Patterson emerged, her face tired but beaming. "You have a daughter, Mr. Xavier. A beautiful, healthy daughter." Ryder entered the bedroom on unsteady legs. Daisy lay propped against pillows, her face flushed and damp with perspiration, but radiant with joy. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your daughter," she said, her voice weary but filled with love. Ryder approached the bed, sitting carefully on its edge. Daisy tilted the bundle so he could see the tiny face within, pink and perfect, with a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as unruly as his own. "She's miraculous," he whispered, gently touching a finger to his daughter's impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around his, and Ryder felt his heart expand with a love so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. "What shall we call her?" Daisy asked. They had discussed names but had never settled on a final choice. Now, looking at his daughter's face, Ryder knew. "Hope," he said. "Hope Elizabeth Xavier." Tears filled Daisy's eyes as she nodded. "It's perfect. Our hope for the future." Ryder leaned forward to kiss his wife, then pressed a gentle kiss to his daughter's forehead. "Thank you," he murmured against Daisy's hair. "For everything. For her. For us." The years passed as years do, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. Hope was joined by a brother, Thomas Ryder Xavier, born in the spring of 1881, and later by another sister, Grace Marie Xavier, who arrived in the summer of 1883. The Rattlesnake Saloon continued to thrive, eventually expanding to include a small hotel when the railroad finally reached their growing town in 1885. Ryder and Daisy managed the business together, their partnership as strong in work as it was in life. Their home became a gathering place for friends and family, known throughout the county for its warmth and hospitality, and of course, for Daisy's legendary pies. Each Sunday, they hosted dinner for anyone who cared to join them, from the town's most prominent citizens to traveling cowboys passing through. And every night, without fail, Ryder received the first slice of whatever pie Daisy had baked that day. "Why does Papa always get the first piece?" 8-year-old Hope asked one evening as she watched her mother carefully cut a cherry pie. Daisy smiled, her eyes meeting Ryder's across the kitchen. "It's a promise I made to myself a long time ago when I first came to Rattlesnake Creek, that I would save the first slice for your father every night." "But why?" the child persisted. Ryder lifted his daughter onto his lap. "Because sometimes, Hope, the smallest gestures can tell the biggest stories. Your mother's pie was the first thing that made me realize how special she was, and her saving that first slice for me every day reminded me how lucky I was to have found her." Hope considered this with the seriousness only a child can bring to such matters. "Is that why you and Mama love each other so much? Because of pie?" Laughter filled the kitchen as Ryder hugged his daughter close. "Not just because of pie, sweetheart, but it certainly didn't hurt." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ryder and Daisy sat together on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear Wyoming sky. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in the comfortable way of long married couples who have found their perfect fit. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out?" Daisy asked. "If I hadn't gotten off that stagecoach here? If you hadn't needed a cook?" Ryder considered the question. "I try not to dwell on what might have been," he said finally, "but I do thank my lucky stars every day that you walked into my saloon that rainy evening." Daisy smiled, lacing her fingers with his. "The best decision I ever made." "Even better than your decision to save the first slice of pie for me every night?" he teased. "Well, that was a close second," she replied, laughing softly. "But I think I'll keep doing it, just to be sure." "For how long?" She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "For as long as we have together, Ryder Xavier. Every night, for all our years." He lowered his mouth to hers, sealing the promise with a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their beginning, now deepened by the shared journey of their lives. Above them, The vast Wyoming sky spread out like a canopy of dreams fulfilled and dreams yet to come. And in the quiet house behind them, 3 children slept peacefully, their future as bright and promising as the love that had created them. It was a simple thing, really a cowboy who saved the first slice of pie for the woman he loved, and a woman who saved the first slice of pie for him in return. But from such simple beginnings came a love story as vast and enduring as the western sky itself, written one day, one moment, one slice of pie at a time. When the 20th century dawned over Rattlesnake Creek, much had changed in the once small frontier town. The railroad had brought growth and prosperity, transforming the dusty settlement into a respectable community with proper streets, a school, and even electric lights in some of the newer buildings. The Rattlesnake Saloon had evolved as well, becoming the Rattlesnake Hotel and Restaurant, though locals still referred to it simply as Xavier's. Ryder and Daisy's children had grown up. Hope was now a teacher at the town school, Thomas was studying law in Denver, and Grace was engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher. Through all the changes, however, some things remained constant. Each evening, Daisy Xavier still baked a pie, and each evening the first slice was saved for her husband. In the spring of 1904, as they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with friends and family gathered in the garden of their home, Ryder raised a toast to his wife. "To Daisy," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests, "who walked into my life on a rainy evening and made everything better, who taught me that home isn't a place but a person, and who, for 25 years, has saved the first slice of pie for me every single night." Glasses were raised amid cheers and well wishes. Daisy, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, blushed like a girl at her husband's public declaration. Later, as twilight settled over the celebration, their oldest grandchild, 6-year-old Emma, tugged at Ryder's sleeve. "Grandpa," she said with the directness of childhood, "Mama says you and Grandma have the greatest love story ever. Is that true?" Ryder lifted the child onto his knee, glancing across the garden to where Daisy stood talking with their daughter Hope. After all these years, the sight of her still quickened his heart. "Well, Emma," he said, smiling down at his granddaughter, "I certainly think so. But the best part is that our story isn't over yet, not by a long shot." And it wasn't. Through the changing seasons and years, through joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, Ryder and Daisy Xavier continued to write their love story together, one day at a time. Their children grew and had children of their own, expanding the family that had begun with just the 2 of them. The ritual of the pie remained a constant in their ever-evolving lives. Even when arthritis began to stiffen Daisy's once nimble fingers, she still baked, adapting her methods but never compromising on quality. And Ryder, his dark hair now silver, his face lined with the years, still savored that first slice with the same appreciation he had shown when they were young. "How do you do it?" a young woman asked Daisy at a church social in 1910. "Stay so happy together after all these years?" Daisy, now in her 60s but still elegant and vibrant, considered the question. "Love isn't just the grand gestures," she said finally. "It's in the daily small ones, the cup of coffee brought just the way he likes it, the way he still opens doors for me after all these years, the constancy of knowing someone sees you, truly sees you, and chooses you, every day." "And the pie?" the young woman asked with a smile. Everyone in town knew the story by now. Daisy laughed, the sound as warm and inviting as it had been in her youth. "Yes, and the pie. Sometimes love is as simple as saving the first slice for someone, night after night, year after year." In 1920, when Rattlesnake Creek celebrated its 50th anniversary as an incorporated town, Ryder and Daisy were honored as its longest-standing business owners and most beloved citizens. Standing together on the steps of the town hall, they accepted a plaque commemorating their contribution to the community's growth and character. "This town gave us everything," Ryder said in his acceptance speech, his arm around Daisy's waist. "A home, a livelihood, a place to raise our family. But most importantly, It gave us each other. For that, we will always be grateful." There were few dry eyes in the crowd, as the elderly couple, still visibly devoted to each other after more than 4 decades together, returned to their seats hand in hand. That evening, in the privacy of their home, Daisy presented Ryder with a special anniversary pie apple, his favorite, made from the recipe she had perfected all those years ago. "First slice for you," she said, her voice softened by age but still holding the clear note of love that had always been there when she spoke to him. Always and forever. Ryder took her hand, pressing a kiss to the fingers that bore both her wedding ring and the subtle marks of years spent creating beauty in her kitchen. "I love you, Daisy Xavier. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you," she replied simply, "through all our seasons." When Ryder Xavier passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1925, just shy of his 80th birthday, Daisy was at his side, as she had been for nearly half a century. The town mourned with her, remembering the straight-backed young saloon owner who had helped build Rattlesnake Creek into a community they could all be proud of. At the funeral, attended by virtually everyone in the county, Daisy stood with quiet dignity, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. She wore blue, not black, because, as she told her concerned daughters, "Your father always loved me in blue." That night, alone in the house they had shared for so long, Daisy baked an apple pie, and when it was done, she cut a perfect slice and set it on a plate at his place at the table. "First slice for you, my love," she whispered to the empty chair, "always and forever." Daisy lived another 5 years, remaining active in the community and beloved by all who knew her. Each night, without fail, she baked a pie, and each night, the first slice was set aside, a tradition she maintained until her final day. When she joined Ryder in the spring of 1930, their love story passed into local legend. Parents told their children about the cowboy and his lady, whose devotion to each other was symbolized by the simple act of saving the first slice of pie every night for years. On their shared headstone in the Rattlesnake Creek Cemetery, beneath their names and the dates that marked their time on Earth, a simple epitaph read, "Love is patient, love is kind. Ours endured through all our years." And if visitors looked closely, they might notice that someone occasionally left a slice of pie at the grave, a tribute to a love story that had become part of the very fabric of the town. A reminder that sometimes the greatest romances aren't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet consistency of daily devotion. For in the end, what is love if not the choice to put someone else first, day after day, year after year? What is love if not saving the first slice of pie for them, every night through all the seasons of a shared life? In Rattlesnake Creek, Wyoming, they still tell the story of Ryder and Daisy Xavier, the cowboy who was captivated by a rain-soaked woman seeking work, and the woman who found her heart's home in a frontier saloon. They tell of how their love built not just a family but helped shape a community. And they tell of the pie, that simple, sweet symbol of a love that never faltered. It is a reminder to all who hear it that love stories don't always end when the book closes or the credits roll. Sometimes they continue for decades, written in the language of everyday devotion. Sometimes they become legends that inspire generations to come. And sometimes they begin with something as simple as a slice of pie,